to do that is to let everybody know who's here. So starting with myself, my name is Patrick Blank. I'm the Executive Director of Micronesian Productions. We are a media production company that focuses on public awareness and public education projects. We help the states, the national government, do projects that help grow public awareness about issues from health to environment to climate change. We're involved in all sectors. We do a lot of work in disability and gender and youth as well. We've partnered with most organizations that are here. So hopefully by now Micronesian Productions is not a name that you haven't heard before. Maybe I'll start with this side and we'll go around and just let everybody know who you are, where you're from.
My name is Willie Costa and I'm with the Micronesian Consultation Trust, but I'm also here because I'm supposed to be helping Patrick review this document as it's being developed, so thank you.
My name is Shirley, I'm with the ODA Pohnpei. Again, this is Nogales Lyman from the government of R&D, Chief of Commerce and Industries. Of the Micronesian Conservation Trust.
My name is Stephen Bond. I work for the USA Climate Ready Project. I'm the Senior Policy and Finance Advisor. I also work with a colleague. My colleague is Patterson Shed, who you might know, who sends his apologies today. Unfortunately, he can't attend, but he'd be very curious to know what goes on. I'm sure he'll provide some input at some point. So, thank you very much.
My name is Mark Costa. I'm with Pohnpei State R&D and the Chief of Agriculture.
Michael. My name is Jolene. I'm with Micronesian Conservation Trust.
My name is Sandel Jr. and I'm also from MCD and Livelihood Project Manager at MCD.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rose Yetilman. I'm with the FSM Rich to Reef project based with the Department of UTECA.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kikwa Apis III. I'm her communication officer for the Rich to Reef project, and I'm also with the Adaptation Fund project. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. My name is Caroline Worthock. I'm with GCF NDA office based at Finance.
Duo, morning. Simpson Abraham, currently your SGP Servant.
Good morning, everybody. I feel like I was set up for Micronesian Trust. It looks like everybody's. I'm not. I'm from the office of ODA and Pohnpei. I'm here on behalf of Kemsky and Gillick.
Thank you, Patrick, for inviting me to this important consultation. Next to me is my wife. She has the language barrier, so I'm introducing ourselves. She's a farmer, I'm a farmer, and we're sitting here with you folks representing farmers association and persons living with disabilities in Pohnpei.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Clayton. I'm from also Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Morning, everyone. This is Mika Newley, Chief of Kabinwan. Thank you.
Well, great, thank you very much. I also want to welcome those of our participants from the other states. So thank you guys for showing up today at your consultations. I'm real happy with the spread of people that have shown up. We have FSM level people, state level people, NGOs that are here. Of course, we invited a lot more, CSP as well. This isn't really our meeting. Micronesian Productions is hosting this on behalf of the Small Grants Program, which Simpson Abraham is the national coordinator. He said he's our servant, and that's great. Simpson's running that program these days, and has Laverne Petrick with him there. And then we've got a lot of different people here, so let's just briefly look at our agenda and then get into things. What we're going to do is we're going to go back and review Op 5 and Op 6. Now, the Op is the operational performance cycle. These were funding cycles. So this goes back to, I believe, 2015, when the Op 5 country program strategy was made. Op 6 we launched in 2016, and actually, I believe many of you were there. Here's Rose, there's Willie, myself, this was in Chuk. But back in August of 2016, at the 5th Environmental Conference for FSM, we hosted a workshop and did the same type of consultation. It's only going to last about 2 hours. We're going to talk about a little bit of the history. We're going to talk about what our current needs are in terms of small grants for communities. And we're going to look at the operation cycle for Op 7 and kind of talk about what priorities we have based on existing programs. We're going to hear from some groups that have given out more than $500,000. NCT's given out small grants through 2 different funding schemes, about almost $700,000, if not more than that. Recently, we've got Rose here from the Ridge to Reef program that I think you guys just went through another round of funding, and the states kind of put up their hands for what they want to do. So we're going to hear about what's going on, where the money is outside of this program that complements, so that we're not duplicating efforts as well. We're also going to hear from groups like Stephen and the USA Climate Ready Group, because they have capacity building assistance that they're providing to communities to help them grow their ability to access these funding schemes. So I think we have a really good spread within about 2 hours. So before lunch we should finish and get everything pulled out in that time frame. So basically, we should be talking about the Op 6 portfolio. What's remaining in Op 6, the challenges and opportunities. But the reality is that we're still spending Op 5 money. I'm going to let that sink in. We're still spending Op 5 money. So this money should have, I believe, and Simpson could correct me, should have expired in September of this year. But we still have a significant amount of money left, which means that the whole Op 6 funding cycle of 1.1 million has not been touched. And starting in January, Op 7 funds are supposed to become available. So we kind of have had a bottleneck in getting the money out. It also means that the whole operational Op 6 plan really hasn't been implemented, because we're still on Op 5. So I want you to put a pin in that and remember that as we talk about Op 7, we haven't really implemented Op 6 yet. Back then, in Op 5, there were about 99 projects, $2.6 million in funding, about $283,000 in co-financing. And here's the types of projects. A lot were in biodiversity, 32 in biodiversity, 16 in climate change, 26 in international waters, 15 in multifocal, only 1 in chemicals and waste. Definitely is an area that FSM has not had a lot of projects in. Land degradation, 13. Climate change adaptation, 1 back in that funding cycle. And as we know now, that's the big area where a lot of funds are coming through. Climate change adaptation. And capacity development, 2. This is what's left. If I touch anything. So in Op 5, there was $1 million for the core funds, and just over $1 million in the STAR allocations. What has been committed already, 86% of the core funds and 64% of the STAR funds, which means there's still about $500,000 that we have to spend, before when, Simpson? Before Christmas? Before Christmas, have to spend $500,000. Challenges have been anywhere from communities having a difficult time getting their full proposals developed. And that's a capacity issue. I myself have been helping groups, and it takes months. Not because I'm too busy, not because they're too busy, but all the different pieces, from letters of support from various agencies that are committing assistance, to getting all your charter documents together, to getting all the quotes together, to getting all the M&E set. We just don't have the capacity at community levels to expediently get that done. And so that hasn't helped our national coordinator get these funds out. He can't get the funds out if full proposals aren't coming in, and there's been a bottleneck there. We have lots of concept notes, but not a lot of full proposals. So there is a plan, and I guess at this point, it's as good a point as any, to maybe let Stephen talk a little bit about how USAID is helping try to get these funds spent by the end of the year.
Alan and Patrick, thank you very much for that, and thank you for the invitation to join us today. As I said before, Patterson, who's well known to the Small Grants Program, was unable to attend today, but let me just explain a bit about, I'm not sure how many people know about the Climate Ready project, but a bit of background is probably useful. The Climate Ready project has been in place for about 2.5 years now, but one of the main focus of the Climate Ready project is to get climate finance into the countries in the Pacific. We have an office here in Pohnpei, which covers the 3 countries in the North Pacific, Palau, RMI, and FSM, of course. And one of the things we particularly focus on is developing projects. And the projects can be very large projects, so they can be multi-million-dollar projects, or they can be small grants. And that's where our focus has been with regards to the Small Grants Program. We had a very successful assistance which we provided to the Micronesian Conservation Trust with their Adaptation Fund project, which had a small grants component of about $340,000, which was funding climate change adaptation projects throughout the country. And I think there was 10 grants that were were finally awarded. And we supported most of the community, most of those project proponents in putting their proposals together, which was, we engaged a consultant from Hawaii. We also engaged Patrick to assist. We travelled to Yap, we travelled to all the states actually. We went to Kozrai, Chuk, and of course Pohnpei as well. And we provided support to those. And the support we provided was basically working with the community groups, talking to them, and helping them to put their proposals together. One of the focuses of that project, and the focus of our project in particular, is climate change adaptation. So because that Adaptation Fund project focused on climate change adaptation, it was very much in our area of expertise and interest. With the Small Grants Program, climate change adaptation is one of the focal areas, so therefore that's where our interest particularly lies. So we're particularly interested in maybe bumping up those numbers. I think that Patrick just said there was only one project in climate change adaptation. We would like to, and I'm sure Patrick would, and I think all of you would like to see that number increase, and we can provide support to that. One of the things which we noticed with our support to MCT was that when people were putting their projects together for climate change adaptation, there was difficulty in focusing on or casting the problem as a climate change problem. There was normally just a very general conservation problem that was being addressed in many cases, and the focus of our assistance was often to get the groups that were putting the proposals together to focus to make sure that the problem was very much a climate change adaptation problem. That was the problem that was being addressed. And so that was one of the things that was very obvious, that there needs to be support for communities to understand that, and if they're going to address climate change adaptation. But also because there's a number of multifocal areas, and there's other areas such as biodiversity and stuff which can also have an overlap into climate change adaptation. We can also potentially support those areas as well. So if there's an overlap to climate change adaptation, even though it might be focused on another focal area, then USA Climate Ready can support that. So building off that support to Micronesian Conservation Trust, we're now engaging support from Patrick. We've engaged Patrick to help a number of project components, which we're still trying to finalise and identify, but we've contracted Patrick to support putting those proposals together to try and get some of that OP6 money out as quickly as possible. One other thing which I think is very important to mention is that because we've had this experience with the Micronesian Conservation Trust in how to put proposals together, we actually developed a small grants guide for climate change adaptation, which should be published very soon. We're working on it with East-West Centre and Pacific Islands Development Program in Hawaii, and to publish that very soon. But looking at, specifically focusing on how to develop that climate rationale and helping people to think about what needs to be considered when putting that climate rationale together, but also looking at how to develop your monitoring and evaluation frameworks, how to do your log frames, how to link it to policies and plans that the governments and states and communities and nationally, because it all needs to be linked in. And lastly, but definitely not the least, the gender, disability and social inclusion component, how to do an analysis to make sure that those aspects of the small grants are being captured in the proposals. I think I might leave it at that for now.
This deadline, you're rewriting or helping to revise or improve some of the concept notes. So is this deadline going to be pushed?
That's something maybe Simpson can answer. So talking about deadlines, about when funding expires. I know you have already, at our last meeting you mentioned trying to get them to extend. So if you can maybe say a few words about when funds are extending to.
Hello, everybody. Yes, let me just backtrack a bit. The OP5 is supposed to finish in June this year. So I got on board 2017, and the remaining portion that we have back then is about $600,000+. So we managed to put it down to the figure. There's supposedly 207 from start allocation. It goes down, but anyway. So they're supposed to finish in June, but I requested them to at least give me till September this year to at least get some money out and grant out. So September is up, and December they gave us until December to sort of try to at least. So the number of concepts that we have now sufficient to use this one, but like Patrick mentioned, helping the community to formulate the full proposal is what we're lacking at the moment. So this morning, actually, last night, 12 o'clock our time, New York, in the morning, I had a session with them, so I can share with you today. They're kind of a bit lenient to us this time, knowing our challenge now. I told them that I've done everything I can do to grant out, but given the complexity of FSM of 4 islands, 4 culture, 4 language, you name it. And I'm sure Jody may speak to that experience back then. But yes, by December this year, we need to actually give a OP5 close with that remaining, but they told us that they will keep tapping on that until we use it up. But OP6 is supposed to finish December. The commitment is 400,000, which we have enough concepts that can tap into that just to formulate that full proposal. So in short, this is my response, really.
So December, funds are expiring for both OP5 and
Yes.
OP6.
Yeah, sorry, just to clarify, that means expended or committed?
Committed.
But
That
the
is
project can go on
Yes,
after.
right.
And you have sufficient concepts to
Concept
cover,
is, we have
or
30.
you don't need any more concepts?
We close receiving concepts until January or February next year. we try to really push these concepts out, which what timely where Patrick is USA helping with the climate related project only. And we're giving green light also to go ahead and recruit soon as possible the state focal point. That means we have to reinstate that process back then that actually contract were not approved. So yes, I'm actually in the process of recruiting the state focal person per state to look at the other GEF focal areas aside from the climate adaptation. Okay.
Is it time to ask questions?
Yeah, you can still ask questions.
Okay. I want to pose this question to my friend Simpson. The American Consumer Organization, we put in the concept note, was approved, and we used up the planning grant. And as I remember, we're supposed to submit the full proposal, but we don't have the risk management in that in the process. So the person who is in charge is already passed on to the other level. And the guy who's running the organization now is not able to find somebody to help him. So my question is it still active, or what's the status of that?
Yes, in short, yes, still active. We're still waiting for your full proposal. So any modifications in your concept, you can include that in your full proposal.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll take that to my.
As long as it's filed already.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so definitely there's a challenge with capacity. I mean, one little thing like having the risk assessment in a proposal is holding it up for, how long has it been, Delbert, that your concept went into a planning grant? Over a year? A year or two. So one of the things that we'll talk to as we go through the presentation is some of these challenges and how do we overcome them. Let's keep going. We kind of talked about the portfolio already. It's a pie chart just kind of showing the breakdown of what those 99, so it was almost 100 projects that were funded under OP5, and that's where they're located. This is another good slide that shows, the majority out of 51 that were tracked in this slide, almost half of them come from Pohnpei, 10 from Chuk, 10 from Tosrai, 8 from Yap. So you can see Chuk, that has the majority of the population, has a bigger challenge, as we know, with communication, with getting proposals going. It's been interesting these last couple of weeks with all the elections and the CONCON stuff, and talking to people from Chuk, that they really don't get good information. There's no easy way for people, even within the lagoon, to get information. So really the outreach in Chuk, having a focal point person there, I'm sure will help tremendously. But these numbers obviously should be a lot higher. I mean, when we talk about getting maybe 10 or 12 proposals done in the next 6 weeks to try to use up OP5 and OP6 funding, it's going to be a challenge. Here are some of the identified challenges under the OP5 cycle. So I guess at this point, let's see if these are the same. Slow project portfolio buildup to reach MOA, so that's the slow, the long time it takes to get a full proposal put in, from concept note development all the way through full proposal. Project implementation and management capacity, there's still problems that Simpson has to deal with MOAs from years and years ago that are still hanging on. So that means funds haven't been spent yet, they've been committed, but haven't been fully implemented. As he mentioned, the island outreach is very hard. We know that in terms of climate change, it's the outer islands that are affected the most. They have the greatest need, but we have very few applications coming in from them. We really made an effort today to try to bring in some of our outer island people. We sent invitations to most of the municipal governments, and Kapina came. I'm happy that they're here. partnership alignment in support of project implementation. And this is a great example of this comes out when the partners, so the other NGOs focused on environment that community groups rely on, are becoming busier and busier. Let's take, for example, the Conservation Society of Pohnpei. They have 4 projects, 2 under the Adaptation Fund and 2 under the Cargill Foundation. Plus, in all of the other groups in Pohnpei, they're listed as a project partner. So they're stretching their limits, and ourselves, Micronesian Productions, is a fiscal sponsor for the Socas Municipal AF project. We're delayed because we can't get meetings with CSP. This is the same in all the 4 states. CCS in Chuk, in Yap, they're getting busier and busier with their own. So having enough partnership support to have NGOs and the community groups be assisted enough is really being a challenge these days. Opportunities, supporting national capacity development on communities. So using planning grants is one way. There is a planning grant that communities can apply for. It comes out of their full grant. It's up to $5,000. They can get that money and have assistance come in. It can be an outside contractor. It can be an NGO that supports them. So, but getting them to know who they can count on, like in Melbert's case, who could he turn to for help creating his risk management profile, just so they can get that going. That's some of the support network that we need to help build. Share the SGP model in the mobilization of the Micronesian Challenge. There are other programs running that a lot of our NGO partners are involved in that can maybe be tapped to use to support mobilizing communities to write more grants as an add-on to some of the work that's being done. The Grant Maker Plus support is really about the NS, the National Coordinator, helping people find additional funding. So today we're going to talk about some of the other programs that are running out there, from Ridge to Reef to the Adaptation Fund, we've even got Green Climate Fund with us today. There's a lot of top-level big projects going. The Ready Plus project that's going on in Kapinga. There's a lot of things going on. How can we use those and get more funding out of the Small Grants Program to help support whatever shortcomings there may be from those projects? And then USAID is providing community groups with support as well, which we've already talked about. So transitioning to this Op 7, we need to really get out from Op 5 and close out Op 6 as well. We've talked about, from Simpson's proposal, that we need to allocate everything by the end of the year. It's going to be a challenge, but we've heard from Simpson, or from Stephen, that there already are plans in place to help start. Literally, I literally signed a contract yesterday to help support 6 full proposals over the next few months. We really would like to review Op 5 performance. I do have a slide from Laverne that she sent, and it's massive, but it's very hard to get into. Maybe something we can do is do a little analysis of what's going on. I can get Simpson and Laverne to help me over the next week to send that out to you as well, so we can see. The development of the CPS, like I said, will happen by the end of the month. By the end of the month, we'll have a draft to send out back to all of you to look at and say, yeah, this is what we talked about, this is what we agreed to. You'll see what the other states have put in as well. So that's why the sign-in sheet is important, that I get everybody's email address, because we'll email everything that comes in from the other states, so you can see that plus the draft. And then we're hoping that Simpson and maybe somebody from Micronesian Productions can go around again and talk to people. Get your feedback. We may just do a survey, an online survey. We know that the holidays, it's really tough to have meetings. We just suffered from early November holidays, and then we've got Christmas and New Year's coming. And it's very challenging to get stakeholders to come together during the holidays. But online, we're hoping that we can send you an email, maybe a survey, and you can answer some quick questions and give us the feedback we need to show the UNDP that the stakeholders agree with this new concept note. So most likely after this meeting, everything will be done via email. And we hope you can take a few minutes to do the responses necessary to get confirmation that we're in agreement on what the new Op 7 country program strategy will look like. Sorry, apologies. That's the end of that slideshow. So, any questions so far? Great. I want to welcome a few new participants, Henry and Kester. All right, so let's get into this country program strategy. What does it take? What kind of feedback do we need from you today? So the goal of the SGP is to effectively support the creation of global environmental benefits and the safeguarding of the global environment through community and local solutions that complement and add value to the national and the global level action, and for us also the state level actions. The thing that I like about these types of consultations is not only do you represent great organizations and stuff, but you're all members of the community, and those communities all have needs about protecting their environment, adapting to climate change. So you're not just representing MCT or the national government or persons with disability or outer islanders, you're representing your communities as well. And so I want you to put that hat on as well today so that you're speaking from the experience of your communities, whether it's from Kitchi or the outer islands. Today when we talk about how we can support you, think about back home, in your villages, how well they're organized, how well they can come up with a concept note and get access to this funding scheme. So for the new operational phase of small grants, we need to develop a new country program strategy. And in a nutshell, in one sentence, the strategy is basically where we're prioritizing the money to go. That's what we want to know. Where should we focus the money to go? 70% of the funds will be committed to whatever focal area the nation decides we need the most help with. 30% will be able to be used outside of that area. Because we don't want to say, well, only this area should get money, and then a community who has a great need, but it's outside of that area, we don't want to have to say no to that. So 70% goes to the major focal area, 30% of the new funds will go to any of the possible sectors that the small grant scheme covers. So we're consulting with the relevant stakeholders. We want to talk today about your particular needs that are not well covered by some of these other programs, so that the money from the small grant scheme is well defined and impactful. So, since in Micronesian Productions, just a few weeks ago now, and to be honest, we signed the contract last week. It's been a process of, we want to help you, but we can't start until we literally sign that contract. And so maybe it was back in September that we had our first meeting. And then October came, and we started gearing up, looking at what we did back in 2016, getting ready. But it wasn't until last week that we signed, and we said, okay, let's launch the consultations next week. So it's very condensed, it's very fast. And we're happy to do it. We know that there weren't a lot of options because everybody's so busy, people with the capacity to do this. And so in a very quick amount of time, we're going to hopefully be able to turn this around, get the outreach done to the other states, get all the information back and out to you before the end of the month so that you can take a quick survey and a look at the new Op 7 country program strategy, and we can show, yes, this is what the nation wants. And then we can sign off, and since we can have this new country program to run with. As I mentioned, timeline, usually 3 to 4 months. And as I said in the beginning, in person here and outreach through multimedia and having other NGOs host. We have handouts that we'll give them these slideshows plus the video that we're doing today. All right, so the Landscape Seascape Initiative, this came out in Op 6. So in 2016, this was launched, and it's basically saying, well, we don't want communities to just look at one problem in their community, whether that's sanitation or water or food security. We want them to look around a little bit more, because honestly, and I've helped many communities, $50,000 is hard to spend if you're talking about one small community and a sanitation project or a planting food security project. 50,000 is really a lot of money. So looking at a landscape, seascape approach says, well, you can do some sanitation to help stop pollution in your rivers and streams, but also add in something else. Let's spend the whole 50,000. And as an example of this, I think it was a community in Kitchi last month. We worked on a concept note, and it was like $20,000. And Simpson sent it back and said, look around a little bit more. What else can you do? Because they want to see proposals coming in 50,000. For one, we need to spend the money in Op 5 and Op 6. So doing 20,000 at a time, it's not a good way to do it. And we want communities handling more than one problem at a time. But it goes back to that other issue of capacity, of being able to implement a multifocal project at the community level with community people is challenging. It's not easy for them, one, to have that vision, and then two, really being able to do the logistics to get it done. It's one thing when it's on this island, it's another thing when it's in an outer island, and you're talking about the issue of transportation of goods, availability of materials, and then labor and engineering services. I think you mentioned you have to send out an engineer to do the Ready Plus project that you guys are working on. There's all these delays that communities have. So using a multifocal approach is great to spend the money. It's great to address more than one problem at a time, but it puts another burden on communities in the planning process and in the implementation process. Yeah, absolutely.
So while doing this, and you're saying that we will be facing a lot of issues with the community projects implemented by the community, the root. So any plan to have some kind of total training, training of trainers?
For project implementation?
Yeah.
It's a good question. Does anybody here have anything to say? Is anybody doing implementation, project implementation training or oversight that they can share? It's not something that we see a lot. One of the things that in Pohnpei State that I can tell you that will happen is very soon, I think it's going to be January now. Let's see, where is Shirley? Pohnpei State is going to be looking at an implementation plan for their strategic development plan. And that, as you can imagine, has all sectors under it, from commerce, agriculture, aquaculture, a lot of things. What we're hoping to do is create better linkages between state-level entities and community groups that are doing work that actually fulfill some of the work that the state wants to see done on agricultural production, livestock production, and bring in state-level assistance. You've got CON land grant people, state agriculture people that can help. We're hoping to build more partnerships like that to provide that implementation assistance. And that's why the planning grants are so important, to bring people in the beginning to help scope out what the project is, to create those linkages so that you have people to support you along the way.
So the reason why I asked this question is we're coming up to ask the folks to be disability friendly, to when you do your project, be inclusive of persons with disabilities. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Norbert. I think that's something that potentially USAID Climate Ready could be able to look at. I know that we've been talking with MCT on a very preliminary phase to provide some support to MCT to look at implementation of projects, and potentially that's something that we could potentially build into engaging someone on a longer term contract that maybe could potentially help with that implementation or the capacity of the communities to implement projects, especially when it comes to gender and disability and social inclusion, because that's such a high priority for our project, and we're continually being reminded that we need to really stress that component. So the implementation side, I think Lily's already mentioned that sometimes that's it's one thing to get the grants into the communities, that's fine, that's good. but the implementation is probably equally important in making sure that those projects are actually successful. And if we can somehow support the development of that capacity, I think that's something we can definitely look at potentially engaging some sort of longer term support, maybe some training of trainers. I'm not sure. It would depend on how we would scope that, but definitely something I think we'd look at in our work. I mean, we need to talk with MCT. I haven't discussed this with them before, but I like the idea and the potential. Okay, thank you.
Now there are some examples of NGOs that are kind of getting into that area. So, like I mentioned for ourselves, Micronesian Productions is the fiscal sponsor for Soca's municipal government's project out in their MPA. And that reason was because for municipal governments which are eligible for SGP money, for them to accept money, then their council has to appropriate it, has to become part of their budget. Really hard for the executive branch to implement grants when having to deal with the council as well. Some governments are very well aligned and can do that, but having a fiscal sponsor. So in addition, what we did was we hired somebody to oversee that project and help meet the deadlines, help with the reporting. Sure, and I look at Shirley Ann because we work with her, and actually Mark, Johnny's supposed to be here, he's the one who does that. So we took on this because we knew that they couldn't do it on their own. Maybe Santiago, your position as well is kind of like that with the coconut project that Vital is running, and then MCT took that on to hire this person, and he goes out to communities and helps them get organized and get things going so that Vital's project can go. So MCT hired on. Any other? Yeah.
Thank you. By listening to what's been discussed, I think it's best that, since you have the fund available, why not hiring some kind of consultant or assistant to work with the communities with their grant writing?
Is that at the office level? So like somebody working with Simpson who's more focused on implementation?
So that's just something to address the issue that you guys mentioned regarding the problem facing the proposals that need to be done. That's just
phenomenal. Simpson, do you think that the focal points, the state focal points that you talked about, we might be able to rely on them for some of that type of assistance?
Yes, that's their role.
That is their role.
Directly with the community. We help them to facilitate the formulation of the proposal.
And implement. Great. So it looks like there is a solution coming then. So for all states, we'll have focal points that can help with concept note development, full proposal development, and implementation. Right?
Thank you, Simpson. What's the level of capacity of the state focal points that we're looking for? And what sort of person are you looking to hire?
Okay, the TOR that we're in the process to send out, the person needs someone that have the time to work with the community, have the good educational background at least, BA or related, and someone that not very much into like today's situation where you're involved in the political work that you don't tend to really focus, but at least someone with a good background and know very much the community, can be more community-driven person, can speak to different levels, and at least could write it. It will be, when I send out the draft, I will invite you comment also. But yes, you can give me your inputs of how you want that person to be, but yes, we are doing the recruitment hopefully next month. Yeah, maybe Johnny, yes. Go ahead.
No, I have a question.
You will elaborate on this.
No, I just was wondering if this focal point should be individual or can be organization as well?
Well, in your case, I don't know how you do it, but at least someone or the organization For example, for Pohnpei's case, it's actually handled by us, the office. But like Koshai, it's one person, same as the other states. But I don't really see it as something that will stop you from one organization to active that capacity. I think we can do that. As long as we have that service available to help the people for the formulation. But I can look into that, but yes, I do.
What's our budget for this year?
We're looking at roughly based on the performance, because they cannot just sit there without doing nothing and we pay them. There is like a timesheet, performance reporting and all that. We actually pay them based on that. But usually it's between 8 and 9,000 per year so it's about 600 per month if they are to perform accordingly. Right, Julie? 600 something, eh?
I think so.
Yes, you should remember, it's just two years ago. Okay. Yeah, 600 per person.
I don't think it's necessary to hire somebody for that kind of period, but just the term of processing those grant proposals. So a lot of us can do it. That's just a suggestion.
Yes, that's right. But back to what we discussed here. The delay is that the capacity for the community to write the full proposal. And if you have that capacity, why don't you help your community to do that, to fast track that?
Yeah, since we all have our priorities, we all have our positions to, attend every day. Probably we have certain time on the weekends, just to help the communities. If we don't have the person available on a full-time basis, just a matter of.
Just to add, the 5,000 planning grant is also
used
for to develop the proposal.
That's right. Yep. So the $5,000 of the planning grant that Jolene was talking about, some of that money can be carved out to pay a grant writer to write those grants. So yeah, when I hear $600 a month, this focal point person needs to have project implementation experience and grant writing experience. Back when I helped the community a few years ago to write a full proposal, it went to the steering committee, came back with 16 issues that needed to be addressed, and some of those I had to research. I didn't know what they were talking about. So at some point, some communities are going to need to bring someone else in. They probably won't, they will need technical assistance to write their grant. I don't think that allows, though, for project implementation. It's just for the grant writing part. So we would still need support for the implementation part as well. But yeah, like was mentioned, it could be possible to embed somebody like that in an NGO in the States so that there's more of a partnership, so that it's a team of people that are assisting instead of just one individual who maybe doesn't have a lot of experience. It's something we can talk about going forward as well. What's the timeline for your focal points to be advertised?
Well, as soon as possible. Do you want this person to be on board by early next year, January? So sorry if some of you I send out the TOR draft for you to comment on. I'll do it as soon as possible. So information like this, please do address that.
Great. All right, thank you. Yeah, good questions.
We have new leadership starting in January in Pohnpei, and we should, we should talk to them about getting some of the support. I mean, if I was in charge of things, I would actually just put $50,000 into a position like that to make sure that when the state access has. I mean, to put $50,000 into a position that would bring in hundreds of thousands of dollars to me in my state is pretty good investment.
Well, you're sitting next to Shirley. So Shirley, does Pohnpei State have a grant writer or have a plan? Do you have a budget for a position like that? You'll build off, you'll see the need. So maybe you're right, with the new administration, maybe the pitch can be made that there is a need, and they find a way within their current budget to help with that. You're going to recruit. All right, so let's get back to this landscape seascape approach, integrated way of working at scale. So you can link biodiversity conservation to sustainable livelihoods and food security and resilience all into one grant. That's the hope of the strategy. A key element 3 years ago was to develop that and have a better focus on grant making and promoting strategic programming. Although you can see we didn't really implement the OP6 country program cycle yet. So not much of this was done. And I mentioned 70% of this landscape seascape primary focus, that's where we'll target the funding to. Well, in 2016, when we did this exercise, it was very loud and clear that our multifocal approach would be to select the 4 main high islands of the FSM for our landscape seascapes. So unlike large countries like, let's say in the Middle East, where water is like their #1 priority issue, we don't really have a #1 priority issue. So 3 years ago, everybody agreed that, our landscape seascape is a ridge to reef approach. That should sound familiar to people by now, since Rose's program has been running for a few years. And even before that program, I think CSP and MCT, Micronesian Challenge, is talking about land and water conservation. We've always been looking at ridge to reef. We see that that's the full spectrum of landscape seascapes for us. On the high islands, it's from the watersheds and the mountains down to the lagoon and the reefs. We have to have a vision of all of that. We can't just focus on one area. Any questions on that? Do you think that's still a valid perspective to have? All right. We talked about this. So this is some of the reasons why we picked the high islands for the landscape seascape approach. Ready access to technical assistance, which we've heard today is a big issue for communities. Additional stakeholder involvement. Trying to do a project on the outer islands when you need Department of Health or Agriculture or other people to come, knowing the shipping schedule, challenges, those prevent much bigger issues. But on most of the high islands, you have access to technical assistance and your other stakeholders. The resources are there, the stores where you get your information, the ability to link multifocal areas because we have the high mountains all the way down to the reefs, and alignment to the GEF 5, or now it's GEF 7, project focus in the 4 states. Oh, I think this was GEF 5, Ridge to Reef. That's right. Which is going to GEF 6 next year.
The GEF 6 is there to the basics and the renewable energy.
Okay, so GEF 5 has an end date of when?
We are supposed to close out next year, November, but we're submitting an extension for 1 more year.
Great.
Yeah.
So for at least the next 2 years through November, if it gets approved. Well, we hope. We have lots of challenges here. People need to understand. So we should still be in alignment with the GEF 5 work that Ridge to Reef is doing. They have people in all the states. They have, I think Rose said, about 5, a staff of 5 here. They travel a lot. They're another great resource for assistance with communities doing projects, because a lot of your work is in the communities, is that right? Municipal governments are involved, fishermen's groups.
Depending on the state.
Depending on the state. Great. So we're still in alignment with the work that is going on with GEF 5.
Since we're talking about alignment, we're placing, in fact, Pohnpei has already a protected area network coordinator based at R&D, and each of the states is going to have a PAN coordinator. So we need to be aligning those guys with our OP7 plan. And we're also working with RED to work directly with the municipalities now, not just NGOs, but really working with the municipalities to build their capacity as well. I know for the FSM that they've also just agreed to a Green Climate Fund project that would also focus on capacity for the municipal governments.
Through which organization? SPC?
SPC, and yes, it's going to be through SPC. And that concept is being developed right now and should be submitted soon. So that would bring a lot of resources between the RARE and the SPC GCF project. There will be a lot of support at the municipality level.
That's great. And RARE is based out of MCT?
Right,
Staff
yes,
of two?
there's staff of
But they go all over FSM?
Yes, they will start here in Pohnpei, but then expand to the rest of the FSM. So yes, that's another opportunity.
That's fantastic. So there's a lot of networking we could be doing. There is a lot of technical assistance out there for communities. But I bet if I asked people, have you ever heard of these groups? Most people would say no. And even worse in Lagoon Islands, in Chuuk, outer islands of any of our states. So getting this information out is going to be critical to us. Supporting the work that communities want to do. And you're right, these are a lot. There's tons of money. If this is a GCF project, and we have our NDA representative here, this is going to be multi-million dollars. And it is across the Pacific. I think there's, I don't remember how many countries that SPC is going to focus on, but FSM is one of several Pacific countries that's going to get assistance on this.
But actually, this one is going to be a FSM project with SPC. They're applying for, I think, what was the amount that they were throwing around? About $30 million to support the local governments with their adaptation. So if it's actually approved, you will see a lot of capacity building happening for the municipal governments, because that's a lot of money that's going to be spent. We're also working on another one, but I'm not going to talk about that because it's going to take about another year to.
That's okay. This meeting won't happen for at least another 3 years. So very quickly, why don't you talk about MCT's GCF work that's coming up?
Yeah. So we have a couple of projects that were. One was submitted on Saturday.
That's the SAP?
Yes, and that's over $8 million, and it's focused on food security. And then we have a concept now for another one, and that's going to be around the same range, and that's really also for capacity building, and it will focus on local capacity, so local governments and NGOs. But the one that SPC is developing right now is going to be focused primarily on local governments. And the reason ours is going to be a bit more liberal on who gets it, because we know that in states like Yap, they don't have municipal governments. So that's going to be tricky for the SPC one. How they would, I think they're going to use the municipalities as traditional municipalities. Because there are no municipal offices like we have here, chief magistrate and stuff. So it will work well in Chuuk, Pohnpei, and Pohnpei, but in Yap it will be a bit tricky because I think there's no municipalities in Yap except for the one town. Anyhow, but ours is going to involve beyond just the municipalities, but we want to support civil society development.
That's great. Just this list alone, we know that Jeff 5, I think we said about 2 years left. They have capacity and technical assistance. The PAN coordinators are something that's new. All states will have. RARE is going to have outreach to all states. SPC and MCT's programs through the GCF are going to outreach to all states. So over the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to have a huge amount of funding and assistance coming out. So getting our SGP, our small grants, aligned with what's coming is pretty important. So this is a good timing for us to have this meeting.
Sorry, just one that we can list is the continuing the global green grants that I have the ability to support local communities with up to $5,000, and we can access 5 per round. So that means 10 communities per year. And those are really good to start communities that have never tried to handle a grant because it's small.
So we also have 4 additional positions that we're going to be bringing on under the R2R project. So we have we're going to be bringing in state technical officers, so 1 per state. That's in addition to the current staff that we have at the moment. We always allocate funding for capacity development for each of the states, but it really depends on which state is most active and who actually takes advantage of that. So I know for Pohnpei, we've missed twice, like 2 cycles. Like we did approve funding for grant writing trainings with the municipal governments, but they never, never happened. And that was because, with the SCA, took up a lot of time, it was just very hard to secure commitment from everyone to say, okay, we'll do the training here. So we missed a couple of that, but we're always allocating funding for things like that to help build their capacities.
While we're on this subject, I have had experience with the Global Green Grants Fund that Willie oversees for FSM, and have helped half a dozen NGOs, community groups access this fund. And as he said, it's a very, very easy fund. From the application to the reporting, if you've got communities that have little to no experience with grants, it's really important to grow their capacity. Because suddenly getting $50,000, that's a bunch of money, and if communities don't know about keeping receipts, how to track and report their finances, how to spend only on budget and not spend on whatever we forgot this, let's add it in without asking the grantor. It's a great place for communities to start. Having said that, during the break, Willie had a question. Maybe I'll let you pose that question to Simpson and see if there is a way under the small grants program that planning grant of $5,000 can actually be a full small grant. And I'm looking at both of you because Joanne used to work there, Jolynn, sorry, and Simpson, you work there. Is there any way you think the GEF would allow us to do smaller grants? Now the planning grant is supposed to help build a full proposal, but is there any way you think that that planning grant could be the full grant itself? And it ends at the $5,000? Because a lot of communities don't have the ability to get to that big proposal yet.
Yes, and we're only asking if the proposal application would be simplified, like the green climate funds. I mean, if they have to go through the whole application that we use for the $50,000, then it's not worth asking.
The concept note application itself is pretty simple. In a day, they can fill that out. So that if that could be used to do the project, not just do the planning for the project and the development of a larger grant. Is that something we can ask you to look into, or do you have any
I think we can look into that because that planning grant intended to the recipient, the proponent, as long as they are legitimate, CPO, NGO, and such, and they can utilize that $5,000 as a process to formulate their proposal. So, yeah.
We understand that, but we're talking about a sort of a different thing. As you explained to Jeff, we're struggling to get these $50,000 grants, because a lot of the communities have never implemented the project before. So why not assign some of it to even smaller grants of up to 5,000, but very simple application and very simple reporting forms, like with the Global Green grants that we're doing right now, where it's like a couple of pages of application and a couple of pages of reports.
We'll still do that. I think that's a good.
Maybe you can ask.
Yeah. Good point.
Because otherwise we'll keep having these absorption capacity issues, because communities who've never tried. And in fact, I would be a proponent of saying that communities should never receive a $50,000 grant before they've actually received a $5,000 grant.
It really does build capacity on implementation, on how to account for the funding. And the last thing a community wants to do is get a $50,000 grant, screw it up, and lose their eligibility. I mean, there have been groups that have been blacklisted throughout the FSM because of issues like that. That money was misspent, or they spent off budget, or they couldn't finish the whole project because it was too big and they didn't have the capacity. And sometimes, as we know, it's one person that communities rely on to get that project done. And if they lose that person, they go off island, whatever, they get a job and aren't available, the community just stops. Everything grounds to a halt. So starting with a much smaller $5,000 project that can be implemented in just a few weeks, successfully, they have that one chance, and then they have a gold star next to their name that we've successfully done one. Now let's move up to a bigger amount. Great, okay. Any other groups that we want to put on this list? This is one of the activities I wanted to do today, is list out all the different groups that are working in the environment sector, where there's money, where there's technical capacity. And, well, yeah, USAID, we've already heard your presentation, but we've got to get you on the list.
They wrote USAID at the top.
I hesitate to put GCF on the list, but it's GCF through organizations that are getting that funding. So as you know, the Green Climate Fund has lots of money, and FSM has had difficulty accessing that. I'm glad to hear about the submission recently on the SAP. That's been over a year in development. We're hoping that the states get more capacity to be able to develop their own project proposals up to get it through the process of going out, because the FSM doesn't write our grants for us. That's not what the NDA office is there for. They're there to facilitate the states to develop their own proposals. So that certainly is a bigger, higher level of funding that can benefit communities, definitely, through different types of projects, like food security or capacity building. But the states will have to do that on their own. I hope over the next year, 2 years, we start seeing more fully developed proposals coming from the states to go up to the NDA. Are we missing anybody? FSM level? I think these are the main groups. I know there's some outside donors, and in the country program strategy, it will list all of the other grants that are out there, from the Canada grant to New Zealand, to Australia. China even gives money to communities, so there are a lot of external donor sources and grants that are available, and hopefully some NGO, or as a Grant Maker Plus, the Small Grants Office can coordinate and have a list of those available grants, their cycles, what they're interested in funding. Right now there's no coordinated list. It's just whatever you know, whatever email gets sent to you to say, hey, somebody apply for this, please. But there's a lot of extra money out there that can be used to supplement small grants that we do through this. All right, so building local capacity and social capital networks. That's about technical assistance. Who can help us with this? We really need to do that over this next cycle. You know, if we're going to move past one community having a success story to all governments and all communities having access to technical assistance and grant writers, we're going to need to build our networks. Not just within state either, between states as well. We can't expect every state to have full capacity available on island, and that's why groups like RARE and MCT and the GEF, they do their work in the states. Having a sense of ownership and responsibility. You know, when a community gets a grant and implements their own project, they'll take care of it. A lot of times, these congressional projects, you give people a water tank, a few years, it's broken. There's no ownership of it because they didn't have to do anything to get it. Enhancing governance. A lot of that is about, at the community level, having organization and community groups with officers, whether that's traditional leaders or elected officials, up to the municipal level. I'm glad to hear a lot of assistance focused at municipal capacity development. They're the ones closest to the people. It leads to better social and conservation outcomes when we have local governance. And then, of course, working at scale. Small grants are reinforced with capacity building exchanges and network development, so things can get bigger. This has been a challenge for the SGP, is that although they've given out lots, over 100 grants, they've all been under 50,000. There's a scheme to go up to 150,000. You can scale up a project. No one has ever done that to date in any of the operational cycles. Some of it is because of capacity issues, or maybe there are other things getting involved. But as all of this capacity comes in, we should hope that over the next cycles, we're seeing groups go from that 50 to say, hey, we can do this bigger. We can oversee it in our whole municipality, not just our community, but let's spread out. Let's advance it in our area. That takes a lot of capacity and vision. And we can't expect necessarily a small group to do that, but a municipal government to say, hey, we did it in one community, now let's expand it to more. And then, of course, building resilience. That's what all these projects are supposed to do. And that's what this landscape, seascape approach is supposed to allow us or facilitate. And then, as I mentioned, 30% of the funds can be used for other projects. Outer Islands will still have access to hundreds of thousands of dollars in project monies that focus on issues other than ridge to reef approach things. That's what we did. And under the last cycle, there was $1.1 million, so it was $330,000 available. That's about 7 to 8 grants. These are the key approaches that we did in Op 6. We're going to do these again in Op 7. We're going to use globally recognized critical ecosystems. We're going to talk about some of the terminology on those pages now. Set up institutional and financial support mechanisms to increase impact. Talk about microfinancing. A lot of communities did a revolving fund. They said, our pig pens are non-compliant with EPA. We want to build dry litter. And so they gave out small loans, and people paid it back so that somebody else in the community could use that money again. That happened way back in 2015. I think AWAC started some of that. We might have been the first to do microfinancing revolving loans for pig pens here in Pohnpei State. And then develop capacity of civil society stakeholders. This is a big one. I don't know how much was done in Op 5. As we know, Op 6 monies haven't been spent, but we need local capacity development from our CSOs, our civil society organizations, our NGOs, doing things like fiscal sponsorship, where we hold your money and we help you spend it appropriately, help you with your reporting requirements, and develop your capacity along the way. That's definitely something we can do. If community groups will look to local NGOs to help hold their money through that first cycle of a grant, it may help them even with a larger grant or a small grant. Critical shifts in the funding cycle, yep. We need to be more efficient with our money. I actually don't know how much money, do you know how much money is available in Op 7? We get core funds and we get star funds. Are we getting the same amount from Op 6? Is it going down?
About 600,000.
So we went from 1.1 million in Op 6 to about 600,000 for Op 7. I'm going to make a guess here. That's because we've had problems spending the money. Yeah? If we could have spent all 1.1 million before the end of the funding cycle, I think we would have got all of our funding. But I think I remember them saying, if we can't, they're going to reduce the amount of STAR funding or core funding? STAR funding, core. And that's something that the FSM provides.
So the core went from what to what?
It's actually the first under OP5 that's numbered in on is 1.5 million. So for OP6 now it's 400. OP7 kicks in January 600. So FSM government during the inception for OP7 committed about 600,000. So we're looking at 1.2 for OP7.
Oh, 1.2 total. Okay.
So the FSM government
yes.
agreed to 600,000 from the start, and then your core is 500.
Around 600.
600, so about 1.2.
That's a significant amount. Leveraging new funding partnerships. So this has been something, of course, that Jeff wants to see, that we're not just using Jeff money, we're also looking at where else we can get funding to scale up these projects. And then taking advantage of new opportunities, new strategic approaches. Let's see, I want to get to... So this was looking at, visually talking about this mosaic approach of landscape seascapes. We know we have, in an area, different areas, there might be an MPA or some sort of reserve. We have bodies of water. We have sacred sites, UNESCO sites. We have villages and towns and parks. So in looking at an area, it's not just look at doing a project in one place, but what can we do for this whole area? Some examples of that are looking at all the issues that surround them, from the ridge down to the reef, and a lot of the different parts. We have issues with watershed destruction, and this is just an example, not to any particular FSM locality. Soil problems. We might have issues with sacred sites, erosion. We know we have sedimentation of the reefs, overfishing, wildfire. Like in Yap State, they have issues with wildfire. Heck, even in Pohnpei we have this. We just had a big fire out in Palantir a few weeks ago. So looking at more than just trying to fix one problem. That's the whole point of this landscape seascape approach. Yeah, we just talked about, we're getting about 1.2 million. You could target 1 to 3 landscapes, seascapes specifically, or like we agreed to last time, just do the whole island, from ridge to reef. Let's see, I want to get to... There we go. Let's talk about some of the terminology to help you make those decisions. Agroecology is the study of ecological processes that operate in agricultural production systems. So this is global terminology. The prefix agro, of course, refers to agriculture, bringing ecological principles to bear in agroecosystems can suggest novel management approaches that would not necessarily otherwise be considered. So examples, agroforestry. That's a familiar term to us. Not cutting down a bunch of trees and making a plantation of just one type of agricultural product, but growing breadfruit, tapioca. I'm sure Mark could do better at this, but all these things together under the forest that we have. So it protects the watershed. So we don't create water problems by doing agricultural projects. It also talks about aquaculture, farming, animal waste management, climate-smart agriculture, things like raised taro patches in the outer islands, using cement beds and raising it up, or doing irrigation techniques that can prevent salt water from intruding. So basically, agroecology encompasses all of that. Agriculture, aquaculture, farming, waste management for livestock, climate change adaptation projects in terms of food security. That's what that means. Low carbon energy access co-benefits. These types of projects facilitate the transfer and uptake of low carbon technologies, renewable energies, in developing countries, and to do so in ways that can assist in economic development. So we've done biogas projects. A lot have been funded by China. I'm not aware of any particular projects unless CEFS Inc. They might have gotten a grant from small grants. Olivier's group that was looking at biogas here in Pohnpei State. Solar projects, wind projects, and this can be at small scales. I know that we have the solar mamas that MCT has taken females from around FSM and they've trained them in India to come back and literally be renewable energy technicians. They can fix those little solar lights and lamps that have been given out under other types of projects. I don't know how well we've linked them into other things besides the work that they were sent out to do. Do you want to update us on that?
Yeah, so we have right now there's a couple of things that are going on with this project. One is a India funded one, and that was the one that took the ladies, 8 ladies to India, and they got trained back in their islands. Now they're waiting for their equipment to come. I think the last time, June actually has more information on it, but so that's going to be sort of the initial one. But then we have a larger €1 million project that's coming hopefully soon as part of the larger EU assistance to the FSM this round. It's a 14 million euro project, and 1 million of that is going into the Solar Mamas program.
So this is kind of the foundation. You know, if communities are going to get into low carbon energy access projects, having people in the communities that can actually help fix, repair, install, advise, give technical assistance, it's kind of critical. Because these are supposed to be community-based, not state, not public utilities working on them.
Yeah, it's going to be really focused more on the in the communities, mostly in Chuk, because those communities that are not identified to be hooked up to a main grid. So we're talking about the really more remote communities, and those are really in Chuk. If you look at the state plans, almost all the states are trying to hook all the outer islands up to the main grid. But we're looking at communities that are not in the plans, and those are really in Chuk. So that program is really going to be more focused on Chuk, but there are things we can learn from it, because we also have to train women from Pohnpei in Paran, Chakayu. And so we're linking this program up with the Coconut for Life project, because that's the way that we feel the communities will be able to pay for those systems. Because this is going to be run as a business, not as giveaways. I mean, the communities will have to pay to own these solar, and because they'll have to pay the women if they're going to, after women come and repair and maintain their systems. They're going to have to pay. So that's why we have to have this Coconut for Life project. When they're selling their coconuts, they'll be able to afford the cost of the systems.
Yep. So if outer island communities in all 4 states or 3 states that have outer islands are interested in doing these types of projects, there's a basis, and you can pay those technicians through the grant as well. So this could be another way to keep those women employed and working and keeping these projects going for many years, not just 1 year until it breaks. So that's great. Other ideas, solar lights at community sports facilities, solar pumps to improve water access from deep wells that are in the islands. So that's one of the other areas. Chemical management. As I mentioned, I don't think we've had many applications for global chemical management coalitions. We've actually just launched one for used waste oil because PUC has 148,000 gallons of used waste oil that is sitting in a pit in Pohnpei. It is one of PUC's biggest environmental hazards that they have. They're looking for ways to get rid of it, working with NGOs to get isotainers in. There's actually, have you heard of the Thorofin dive boat in Chuk Lagoon? The Thorofin, very popular dive boat. Tourists come in, stay on the boat, dive for a few days. It burns used waste oil as its fuel source. So PUC is planning to ship this used waste oil to Chuk, fill up the tanks on the Thorofin for free, and then they continue their tourism activities, and we get rid of our environmental hazards. And we're looking to do that for other entities in the States. I know Vital has a way of exporting their used waste oil, but we don't have anybody specifically focused on that. We don't have an NGO right now. I know that Deckham has done a project recently with SPREP, and the budget was big, and they only took off a few thousand gallons. So the impact wasn't as great as we would hope. But with a project like 50,000, you could ship 10 isotainers over to Chuk and get rid of about 60,000 gallons from the local utility. So that's just an example of global chemical management coalitions, getting people to work together to solve this waste issue of the chemicals and persistent organic pollutants that we have. And we don't have that many in FSM, and maybe that's why it hasn't been such a big issue for us, but we do have some on a small scale. Yes.
We do have a few stove that's cooking on fish. Use of diesel. You might can use of waste oil.
Yeah, that might be, or coconut oil.
So that's the idea for waste oil, so you can use some more salt on the island. So you can waste oil.
Okay, let's talk about that.
You can also use the oil for treating lumber on a tree. Treat it.
Oh.
So you fill the tank and treat it with the wooden tank.
So you
For the termite.
Yep.
So we have some sort of waste oil in.
Very interesting. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Those are great creative ways of dealing with an environmental issue. All right, so getting back to this, we want to make sure, we would have loved to put out a radio announcement to have this room full of 100 people, but as I mentioned, because of the holidays, our inability to travel around, we're going to try to get as much visibility, put it on Facebook, get it out, these videos out and post them so that the other states can have their consultations. We can scope out what this new country program strategy is going to look like. We can select our landscape seascapes. We need to do a baseline assessment. That's something that Willie and two other experts, one from TNC, Liz Turk, and then Donna Shearing from EPA, I have to manage different parts of the baseline assessment. We really want to update what's been going on since 2016. So taking a few minutes, I did ask Rose to share her latest report on Ridge to Reef, so we can incorporate some of what Ridge to Reef has been doing for the last couple of years. But I know there's also things like the Ready Plus project that Nathan, you just mentioned. Are there any other major projects for environment that have been going on? We have an adaptation fund. I have the MCT information on Cargill and adaptation. I have that already. Anything else?
In the discussion, we're negotiating with these economists. He has approved citizenship from the New Zealand and Fiji. Sweden and Fiji. He's trying to help the state with house waste. Turn the house waste into energy, renewable energy. So that will be coming back here. And this project most likely will try to be implemented come back here.
So that's coming up, sanitation. Great. Other big funding sources that are working outside. I guess we listed on the front page some of the other ones that are coming.
There's a group that we are working with that's providing the scholarships for the students, but they're also looking into helping with waste management with Association for the Promotion of International Cooperation. APIC.
APIC, yes.
Yeah. And they're really interested in helping their states with waste management. And in fact, they're inviting people to go to Japan to look at a system that they how people are benefiting from recycling. Great. And they want to see if that can be done here.
Okay, so we'll put that on the meeting.
In fact, they're also interested in helping Pohnpei State start a similar recycling center like they have in Pala, the one in Coro. And I've shared this with the Pohnpei EPA. I don't know why they're not enthusiastic in going after APIC to come. Because there's already an example in Pala. All they need to do is say, build one here in Pohnpei, and APIC is going to provide some of the funding for that.
Great.
And I know that they work closely with the Japan embassies. So the Japan small grant program will also be used as part of this. For those of you who haven't been to Palau, their center recycles everything. So everything that comes in, all the biodegradables become fertilizer or soil, they turn into soil. All the plastic, the bottles they've actually trained to Palauans to blow glass. So they're making nice gifts from blowing the glass. So you go there, you can get,
They crush the glass.
Crush the glass, and there's 2 Palauan young men who are blowing the glass into beautiful things that they're, they can sell. The president uses them as gifts for visitors and stuff. Nothing is thrown away.
Nothing is thrown away. All right. Anything else in your field of view? Any other major projects being implemented? We got adaptation fund up here as well. That's a big project in Pohnpei. We have $1 million that's going here. Good. That's quite a bit of stuff. So we're going to capture all of this stuff that's been going on in the baseline assessment. Because the assessment is really supposed to reflect, okay, this is what's going on, so this is where our needs are. This isn't what's going on. Things like solid waste, we're going to be starting them, but right now nothing's really happening. So that in the country program strategy, we can try to focus on some of those areas. All right, so we're going to literally next week, like the information that I get, I've gotten reports, you sent me the biodiversity reports from all the states and the national government, the Ridge to Reef report. I'll look at, I've also got the NDA, the country program that the FSM made for the Green Climate Fund. Those documents will all be incorporated into this baseline assessment, which then should validate what we decide on our landscape, seascape, and establish our modalities for implementation. I'll be sending that out probably at the end of the month, along with the finalization of the country program strategy. So it's a quick process. The good thing is, I would say that 95% of OP6 is still valid. We haven't used that money. We haven't implemented enough projects to say that OP6 strategy, we're going to tweak it with what comes out of these consultations in the states, upgrade it, and get it back out for everybody to look at and validate. And then Simpson's got his new country program, and in 2017 or 2020 we can launch the OP7. Any questions? And of course, we're going to advertise this. We're going to make this information available to everyone that wants to know about it. Great. Well, yeah.
I because my ears were not functioning well this morning. So I didn't hear about anything with health. Did I? Or because while we were talking about waste and gas and what you call that, chemicals, I was thinking about the carbon monoxide from the exhaust pipe of your car and my car. If we are tackling that too.
Well, the solution that just pops to my mind right now is using coconut-based fuels. Right? There's always going to be some exhaust unless you're using 100% electronic vehicles. So that technology is available. I'm not sure a small grant would work, but it certainly would do a pilot project. There are conversion kits that you can get that will convert an engine to use only coconut fuel or used cooking oil from restaurants. There are vehicles that you can modify and it will use that as fuel. And it cuts down on using diesel and gas, but there's still some exhaust that comes from that. So to get back to your original question, Albert, yeah, you didn't hear a lot about health, but health can be incorporated into a lot of these things. When you're talking about chemical management, it's all about preventing health issues. If you're talking about water, it's about bringing in healthy, fresh water to communities, which is necessary for sanitation and health. So health can definitely be a supporting factor, but the funds for this are not specifically targeting health as a primary. These are about environment. Health is always in there somewhere, and livelihood should be as well. Communities should prosper from these grants, and maybe even be able to earn money like the Solar Mamas project, renewable energies, that somebody is making money, because we know that that's a key factor in sustainability. If there's no money to be made, people have to look somewhere else to do something. And then that project goes down because people lose interest or attention because they have to do other things. Does that answer the health question? Any other questions? Any other comments, statements about the process, about what we've discussed? Great. Well, I see lunch is here, right on time. They'll be bringing that in. I just want to say thank you very much for coming today. Literally in a week where we only have 3 working days, because not a lot has been going on, I'm really happy you came and took time to come, because I know you have a lot of stuff back at your own offices to deal with. So thank you very much for coming, for sharing. We heard a lot of good inputs from a lot of different sectors. I hope this was useful to you in sharing some information and to know what to expect over the next few weeks. If you can take a few moments to finish that survey, and we get that back in to validate our landscape, seascape approach that we'll be selecting. Just a show of hands, how many of you think that the whole island approach is still valid? All right, well thank you very much, but this is the documentation we'll need to confirm that everybody still agrees that our landscape, seascape could possibly remain as the entire island approach. So please take one, pass it down.